light heavyweight finishers battle it out. Coming up this weekend, we have Tafon Nchukwi taking on Azamat Murzakanov. The nickname's a professional. I think it's a lame nickname, but the guy definitely handles his business in the cage. He is 10-0 as a pro, the former 2019 Brave CF openweight champion. Like, we're throwing it back to the days of pride. Who is he? Mirko Krokop? I know he doesn't fight that way, but if you look at it for Murzakanov, a very, very interesting prospect coming into the UFC. I mean, the guy's already 35 years old. He was supposed to debut back in 2017, just getting a straight shot to the UFC to take on Joachim Christensen. Who knows? This could be, in a bizarro world, the Azamat Murzakanov era. He could be a champion, but we would never know. He tested positive for boldenone back then, so they decided to give that a little bit of a hiatus before that debut. If you look at the 5-on-in for Murzakanov, he is the lone man to go out there, and the last man to go out there, I should say, and finish Andre Muniz. That was back 5 years and 4 months ago. Wins over Georgi Sakayev, Guto Innocente, Mohamed Fakhreddin, and that was back in that Brave one-night open-weight Grand Prix. He was able to beat Innocente and Fakhreddin to win that belt. Then he has a long layup between the Fakhreddin fight and Mateusz Scheffel over on Dana White's Contender Series. That was week 1. We'll also talk about another week 1 guy who's on this card a little bit later on. But when I look at this fight map for Azamat Murzakanov, you look at him, he's coming over from Russia. He's trained in New Jersey for the longest time. K-Dojo Warrior Tribe has really put this guy on a bit of a poster. You can find on their own YouTube channel videos from years ago where he's training, where he's doing like the hockey player thing or the CrossFit training thing with the ropes. But for Azamat, to me, he looks like an in-shape John Vellante, but he really is a lot more than that. He can work in his takedown.
I would hope so. If he was any less, he wouldn't be in the UFC.
From southpaw, he does kind of throw a really nice lead jab to throw his left overhand. He can mix it up with his striking, and that's what I love when I watch these Azamat Murzakanov fights.
He does have really nice power on the inside, but what he does struggle with sometimes is setting up those inside power shots. He does have a good jab, but sometimes he does struggle with the accuracy of it, and it's something that would be nice. It was almost reminiscent of watching, like, Colby Covington last night. Colby Covington looked great. It's hard to dock his performance in any way, but let's be honest, his striking into the clinch wasn't the most refined that we've ever seen. Murzakanov can fall into some of those holes where I'm kind of reaching on some of these punches on my really long range, but once he is able to get his footwork right and get on the inside, he does have really nice power with his hooks and with his uppercuts. It's going to be really interesting to see who's the person moving forward in this fight, though, because with Tafon Nchukwi, we know how good of a striker he is and just how explosive of a striker he is, but he is one of these unique strikers who, he doesn't have the best volume in the world, and honestly, I wouldn't even put him in the top tier of, like, power punchers, because he does need to set up his power shots a little bit at this division. So I do think it's really going to be a key for Tafon in this matchup to be the one moving forward, because if he's the one pushing Murzakanov back, and listen, that's easier said than done, because all Murzakanov knows is moving forward, not taking a step back. But if Tafon can start getting some forward momentum and really implementing that body and leg kick that we've seen throughout his career, I think he can have a lot of success throughout this fight. But I really do think the person moving forward is going to be the one having the most success.
And for Azamat Murzakanov, on screen you can see it, the fact that I was a little cheeky and I went with 216.5 pounds. He was scheduled to take on Jared Vanderaa not that long ago. Weighed in for it. Vanderaa weighed in for it. And then the fight was scratched, and Vanderaa ends up with Andrei Arlovski, and here we are with Murzakanov taking on Nchukwi. Even before that, he was scheduled to take on Marcin Prachnio. That fight fell out, would have been at 205 pounds. But for Murzakanov, that is the latest weight, so they say. And I look at it, I mean, again, the fight against Scheffel where he's able to drop him, was Herb Dean asleep at the wheel on that finish? Like, he really should have called it a little bit earlier than that. And for Tafon Nchukwi, that's the point. I mean, the weirdest part about him is he's 6-1 as a pro. You look at it, 3-0 as an amateur, all finishes and all fairly quickly. And then when he's a pro, again, Alex Myers, A.T. McCowan, William Knight, Al Matavau, all knockout wins. But his last 3 fights have been a decision. And the weirdest part about it is, too, if you look at it for the man himself, Tafon Nchukwi, Alex Myers, A.T. McCowan, William Knight, all of those fights above 205 pounds. Now, he's weighing in that 225, 235 mark when it's at heavyweight. William Knight, that was a catchweight fight when William Knight was off of Contender Series on a developmental deal and he loses to Tafon. The best part about Tafon's game, though, and this is really the highlight of it, two-time national WKA karate champion in 2016, two-time champion in 2017, two-time 2016 world champion, and also a 2017 IBJJF silver pan medalist. And you like to see all of those well-rounded things out of Tafon Nchukwi. And this is where I'm going. In the Alex Myers fight, Myers goes 0 of 8 in takedown attempts. McCown goes 0 of 3. William Knight's not able to work the takedowns. Tafon Nchukwi is a good striker. He's had good takedown defense outside of the UFC. Jin Young Park able to kind of get rid of that mystique a little bit. But when Tafon is having his most success, it's like this slow, plodding forward style. He's able to close distance with some of his power. And when he does land and he's able to bring in combinations, he really is a force to be reckoned with. But he's more than just that karate background that he has in his back pocket.
He just doesn't have the volume, though, and it really is frustrating watching him. I do almost liken him to, like, Paul Felder was one of the best examples of this, because Paul Felder doesn't have one-punch knockout power, and he doesn't have the best volume in the world, but he's good in both areas. So he did have to throw in combination to hurt his opponent later on in the fight to really make the most of his fighting style. Where Tafon kind of lies on that spectrum is, I do have big power if my opponent's moving towards my combos in a lot of cases, which will present itself in this matchup, but I don't know if I'm confident enough in Tafon to be able to throw those combinations round after round after round. And with his takedown defense, it is interesting. I think he's almost so focused on defending the takedown that he's not letting his hands go because of it, because like you said, he does have really good takedown defense, but it's almost like he's so cognizant of, okay, my jiu-jitsu's not great, I do need to worry about wrestling in a lot of cases because I am such a pure striker. I think it is almost holding him back a little bit with his own striking repertoire, and we've seen this before. It happens at higher levels where wrestlers can drop really good strikers because the threat of the takedown's there. I just think with Tafon, it's a hesitancy in his own striking that you don't love to see from someone who is a natural striker. And when you look at his 2 wins in the UFC, Jamie Pickett, who has looked better, to be fair, but he got dealt with quite quick by Kyle Dawkins not that long ago. He beat him, and Slow Mike Rodriguez, who one day can look really good, and one day could lose to a guy coming off Contender Series. So, Nchukwi really does need this win, and I know we always say that when someone's fighting someone making their UFC debut, but I feel like for Tafon, there was maybe not a crazy amount of hype coming into the UFC, but definitely more than most. So I do think that this is an oddly important win for his career.
So as I mentioned, I mean, he had the fights at, in and around a cruiserweight, 225, 235. Then he has the fight against Almatov out on Dana White's Contender Series. In the UFC, he fights Jamie Pickett at 185. He gets the win. He loses to Jun Young Park at 185. And then he moves back up to 205 his last time out against Slow Mike. It was a good performance. He went 3 of 3 on his own takedown attempts. He landed at 145 of 240 total strikes, and he had 4 minutes and 45 seconds of control time. You like to see that. Not necessarily sure how those openings would present themselves, though, against a guy like Murzakanov, who has a master of sport and hand-to-hand combat in his own back pocket. And I really do like the takedown abilities of Murzakanov, who at 35, at some point, we're going to start to slow down. I know he doesn't have a ton of miles on the clock at 10-0, but you watch the way that he fights, he bounces on his feet. He really is a light fighter. So the movement goes to Murzakanov. The grappling, I give a slight edge to Murzakanov. And then when it comes to the volume, the one thing that scares me out of Murzakanov, I think his last fight on Contender Series with the long layoff that he had against Scheffel, it was about 2 minutes and 30 seconds of nothingness. And then when Murzakanov decided to turn it on, he goes out there and he gets the finish. But in a fight against Tafon Nchukwi, who is able to realize, I don't need to fight in front of this mirror anymore? That's really going to be the kicker in this one.
Exactly. And I do think Murzakanov is the more well-rounded out of these two guys. And honestly, I was going to say he has the more power. I would say Tafon has slightly more power, but you get the idea. If Murzakanov can get on the inside, it's going to be very equal. I just worry about Murzakanov leaving himself open on some of those entries. That is going to be one area where he could lose, really, to anybody in this division. Like, anyone who weighs 205 pounds when they get an opening like that, if they land clean, they can win. Like, OSP made a career out of just making guys make mistakes and then finishing them in brutal fashion. So I do worry about Murzakanov once he does start to fight the more skilled guys in this division, but I do like him in this matchup.
Dana White's comparison for Tafon Nchukwi on Contender Series was that he has a little bit of that Mike Tyson to his game. So if we have a look at the odds for this fight, Murzakanov opened the underdog at a plus 125. He's a minus 150 right now. For Tafon Nchukwi, open a minus 145 is plus 124. So the odds have completely shifted. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, surprise to us as they are to you. I'm going to say over-under with Murzakanov as the favorite now. 65% Murzakanov, over-under.
Under.
You're going to say under, and it is over. 518 total votes, 79% Murzakanov, 66% have him to win by knockout. For the 21% that I have Nchukwi, 50% by knockout, 45% by decision. 5% think he's going to get the submission. Maybe it happens. It would be a surprise to me as it is to you, as I say. And I would shoot a whole thing of Da Bomb hot sauce if Tafon Nchukwi is able to submit Azamat Murzakanov. For me, I like Murzakanov in this matchup. Again, I think the movement is going to be key. When you're looking at Nchukwi, he can create some angles with his striking, but it is the movement and constant movement of Murzakanov. Unless he gets himself forced up against the fence and in some of those tight positions against the cage, I don't see him having as much of a hard time in this matchup. So for me, I like Murzakanov, and I really do like the amount of combinations or the differences that we see in the striking for Murzakanov, fight in, fight out. Has a really good leg kick as well. So a lot of different looks you can get out of him, and I'm going with him in this one.
I like him in this matchup, but I'll say this. I don't think he's going to get into the rankings, and I know he's 35, so that's not some hot take by any means, but I do really worry about some of those openings he leaves on the feet because they are wide. And in his Fight on Contender Series, you're right. He didn't really prove anything in that matchup. Like, nothing happened, and then he scored the knockout, and it was over. So I do worry about what we're going to see once he does face adversity, especially at the UFC level. So I think this will be a good stepping stone for him to start his UFC career, but I do like Murzakanov.
Murzakanov coming in here with that hype of like a Klidson Abreu, and we saw what happened to him in the UFC.
Crowd goes mild.
But both of us going with Azamat Murzakanov. In this fight, you let us know down below who you have. Is it Cameroon's Tafon Nchukwi? Is it Murzakanov? We got a big time slate of fights coming up that you're not going to want to miss, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and we always say, let's get into it.